The famine emigration, the emigration to especially the United States after the Great Hunger was on a massive scale. And in 1858, in Ireland and America, a new organisation, new Republican organisation called the Irish Republican Brotherhood, popularly known as the Fenians, was established. And they took inspiration directly from Wolfe Tone, Robert Emmet, Fintan Lalor, whom I've mentioned. And in 1867, they attempted a rising in Ireland, and their proclamation again asserts Republican ideas. It states, "All men are born with equal rights. We aim at founding a republic based on universal suffrage, which will secure to all the intrinsic value of their labour. We declare also in favour of absolute liberty of conscience and complete separation of church and state. Republicans of the entire world, our cause is your cause. Our enemy is your enemy. Let your hearts be with us. Herewith we proclaim the Irish Republic." The next great Republican and socialist figure that I want to speak about is James Connolly. And he's probably the most important thinker, writer and activist in Irish Republicanism, along with Wolfe Tone and probably P.H. Pearse. Connolly was born of exiled Irish parents in Edinburgh, and from a young age he was involved in trade unionism, in the fight for workers' rights, and his family were also Irish Republicans, as most of the community were in Edinburgh where he was born. They were supportive of the Fenians, they were strong for Irish independence, and throughout his life as an activist, James Connolly linked the struggle for Irish independence with the struggle for socialism, for justice for working people and a just economy. And he was consistent right from his earliest days until his execution in 1916. Connolly was a trade union organiser in Ireland, in the United States, and then he returned to Ireland. In the United States, he worked with workers of all nationalities in many different industries, and he saw how important it was for workers to be organised. He said in 1897, "If you remove the English army tomorrow and hoist the green flag over Dublin Castle, unless you set about the organisation of the Socialist Republic, your efforts would be in vain." Because for Connolly, simply removing British rule from Ireland was not enough. If the social and economic system remained the same, if the majority of people remained in poverty, if the ownership of the resources, the land, industry, and so on, and political power remained in the hands of the few, then it was simply a change of flag. Connolly also saw, because he worked as an organiser for the Irish Transport and General Workers Union in Belfast, he also saw how the British government and the British system still used sectarianism to divide workers. Just as we have seen from the days of the United Irishmen, sectarianism was used as a way of dividing and ruling Ireland. At the time that Connolly worked in Belfast as a trade union organiser, he saw how the Orange Order was used to separate Protestant workers from their Catholic fellow workers. And Connolly identified in 1914, when the British government first began to propose the partition of Ireland, the division of 6 counties from the rest of the 32 counties, from the 26 counties, he saw that this would be a disaster for Ireland, and it would create even worse sectarianism. He said in 1914, "Such a scheme as partition would set back the wheels of progress, would destroy the oncoming unity of the Irish labour movement, and paralyse all advance movement whilst it endured. To it, Labour should give the bitterest opposition. Against it, Labour in Ulster should fight even to the death, if necessary, as our fathers fought before us." So he was very clear that any attempt to partition Ireland would be a disaster. And he said that it would lead to a carnival of reaction. In other words, conservatism ruling north and south, which is indeed what happened when Ireland was divided in 1921. He constantly came back to the need for a socialist solution. He said in 1915, in the long run, the freedom of a nation is measured by the freedom of its lowest class. If those at the bottom rung of the ladder are in poverty and marginalisation, well then we don't have true freedom. He said also in 1916, the Irish working class, the only secure foundation upon which a free nation can be reared. The cause of labour is the cause of Ireland, the cause of Ireland is the cause of labour. Now, there would be some nationalists who would say that the economic question, the socialist question, should be set aside until independence is won. And he argued against that. He said, you know, these are two sides of the one coin. And then there would be those who would call themselves socialists, who would say that national independence is irrelevant, that the nation is irrelevant, that self-determination is not an issue. And again, Connolly argued against that, and it's an argument we still hear today. He said that, well, we cannot have socialism, we cannot have true freedom if we are still tied to the British Empire, if we do not have an independent Irish state, and if we do not have a united Ireland, because partition divides workers, it divides the people, and it weakens Ireland and the Irish working class. And Connolly's last statement was in Dublin Castle in 1916. He was on under court martial and was to be executed, and he gave his last statement to that British Army court martial, which still rings out today, the words of Connolly. Believing that the British government has no right in Ireland, never had any right in Ireland, and never can have any right in Ireland, the presence in any one generation of Irishmen of even a respectable minority ready to die to affirm that truth makes that government forever a usurpation and a crime against human progress. The next important figure that I want to say something about is P.H. Pearse, Pádraig Mac Piarais. And Pearse's life highlights how important the notion of culture and the cultural revival that happened in Ireland at the end of the 19th century, say from 1893 into the years before 1916, how important that was. It was a reawakening of people's sense of Irishness, that they had a distinct culture, very importantly that they had their own language, the Irish language, which had been devastated by the Great Hunger, by An Gorta Mór, because the vast majority of those people who died during the Great Hunger and who emigrated were Irish speakers, so the language was devastated. But at the end of the 19th century, start of the 20th century, people began to rediscover the Irish language and to realise that unless they acted, the Irish language would die out. And this strand of thinking strengthened Irish republicanism and Irish separatism and the cause of independence, because it deepened it. It made people see that there was more to Ireland than simply political independence. It was about having a distinct culture and a contribution, or a unique contribution to the world. Pearse was very much to the fore in that cultural revival, and he was also a Republican. He was a separatist. He summed up his ideas in a phrase at the grave of O'Donovan Rossa de Fenian in 1915, when he said of O'Donovan Rossa, "The clear, true eyes of this man, almost alone in his day, visioned Ireland as we of today would surely have her, not merely free, but Gaelic as well, not Gaelic merely, but free as well." And Pearse was influenced by James Connolly. The two men became friends and they influenced one another, but particularly the socialist ideas of Connolly did have an influence on Pearse. And he put it very clearly in an essay that he wrote just some months before his execution in 1916, called "The Sovereign People." And what he was saying there was similar to what Connolly said, that freedom cannot just mean a change of flags or a change of government. It has to mean a change of the system and the ownership of Ireland for the people of Ireland. And in his essay, The Sovereign People, Pearse says, the nation's sovereignty extends not only to all the material possessions of the nation's soil and all its resources, all wealth and all wealth producing processes within the nation. In other words, no private right to property is good as against the public right of the nation, but the nation is under a moral obligation so to exercise the public right as to secure strictly equal rights and liberties to every man and woman within the nation.